Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Lizdoyleharmer, and I am an executive coach as well as a facilitator. I do a lot of work in corporate, particularly supporting women and people of color or anyone who doesn't fall into the typical leadership mold, helping them to elevate themselves to leadership. And today, in this practice, in this session rather, what I want to share with you is a practice called presence. And I'm going to share my slides with you now. And the title of this workshop, this group learning experience, is Presence. Let me share my slides. It's presence, harnessing the power of your being to align your doing and amplify your results. And there's a reason why I've given it this really long title here, focusing first on being. And so maybe you're in a place right now where you're looking around and you're seeing the results of your life, whether that's career, family, personal relationships, your health, whatever it is. You're looking around and in some way you are dissatisfied with the results you're seeing in your life. And so it's very normal for us as human beings to focus on what we do, right? If we want to get something different, you have to do things differently. So maybe you're focusing on trying to adopt different habits or structure your day differently or whatever it is. But what I would put forth to you is that there's actually one step before that. And that's to practice shifting your state or practice working with your state of being. And if you don't do that, you can often reach this situation where you might adopt a new habit for a couple of days. And then right after that, after a few days of success, you find yourself falling back into old patterns. If that's anything you can relate to, it's because you haven't addressed your state of being. And what I would say is that your state of being comes first. Shift first the state you're in, shift how you are. That more easily supports you in aligning the things you do with what you want, and that will amplify your results. And so, if any of that makes you curious, I do invite you to stick with me for the next roughly 30 minutes or so. We'll see how long this goes. One thing you will want to do is grab a pen and paper, just have that with you. And you'll also need room to stand. So if you're listening to this while on a road trip, I've just done that, you're in the car, you're running errands, this may or may not be the time to listen to this recording. Ideally, you have a place where you can be uninterrupted, where you have access to that pen and paper, and also where you can stand. I'm going to share a practice with you, and it's helpful to do that practice while standing. So I've talked a little bit already about who this is for. So this is for anyone who in some way is looking around at the results of their life and realizing that those results are not actually what they want, right? So that might be in career. There might be something else you want for yourself in your career. Maybe you have a dream to start a business, and yet you're finding that the things you do on a regular basis are not actually lining up. And so maybe you have ideas of things you're going to do, but for whatever reason, you can't get around to doing them, right? That might be one way this is showing up for you. Or maybe you're in corporate, you want to climb that corporate ladder, you have ideas that you're really passionate about, but for some reason, you're not able to share those ideas, vocalize those ideas. Other people are getting the credit for your ideas. There's a disconnect between the way you're showing up, the things you do, and the results you actually want. Or maybe it's showing up in family for you, right? Maybe there's a reactive way that you're being with the people you love, whether that's your kids, your partner, your parents, your friends. Maybe there's a reactive way that you are being that's not actually in alignment with how you want to be with the people you most deeply and truly and passionately care about. And when I say that, I want to mention that this isn't about us being hard on ourselves for not always showing up, 100% at our best. But it's about being honest with ourselves and saying, you know what, there's something happening here. There's a pattern, there's an automatic way that I'm showing up, whether it's at work or at home with friends, with family, in my career, that's not really working for me. And there's something I'd like to do to change that. So if you're in that boat, then you are in the right place. And what I also want to say is that you are completely 100% normal. So if you find that you're reactive sometimes, right? You're not responding to things the way you would most ideally like to respond to things, whether that's getting upset with your family, whether it's not speaking up at work, whether it's not following through on that idea, whatever it is. I want to say that you are normal. If you find that you are reacting rather than responding, I want you to know that this is 100% normal. And so, again, speaking to that point of not being hard on ourselves. And that's because we have evolved to react rather than respond. We have evolved to make quick, snap judgments, to react automatically based on those judgments in a way that helps keep us safe. Right. So I have a picture of a saber-tooth tiger here, saber-tooth lion. I'm not quite sure what it is. And in a very simple and predictable world, a long, long time ago, it served you well for you to quickly identify danger, right? Make a quick snap judgment, run, fight, flight, flee, whatever it is, and then respond to that without thinking. Those of us who paused and thought too long, they are not with us, right? They've been devoured by that saber-toothed lion or tiger or whatever this is. So just simply for you to know or to remember that if you are automatically responding to things in a way that may not be helpful for you, you are 100% normal. And that's not a sign that you are flawed. It's actually a sign that you are resilient. You are resilient. Your ancestors are resilient. This was a pattern that we all had to adopt in order to survive in a very treacherous and physically dangerous world. It was also a much more simple world, right? It was a much more simple world back then. Now we have the complexity of government, of corporations, of family life, of changing gender roles, of changing organizations, of climate change, of legal and political issues, of social consciousness. We have so much complexity in our world today that this old, outmoded way that we have evolved to make quick judgments and react no longer works in the complex world that we find ourselves in now. And so just as in the past, as humans, we have adapted to our physical world, and we once used to walk on all fours, we once used to have fur on our body. Over time, we learned to evolve, to shed our fur, to stand upright, to adapt to our physical world. Just as we have done that in the past as humans, I believe this is our time to do that again, to evolve out of quick judgment reactivity into a more present way of being that helps us, I don't even want to say manage the complexity we face, but thrive in the complexity we face. I do believe that is 100% possible for us. So when we're talking about complexity, I really like this model of Dan Siegel's wheel of awareness, right? What are all the things we're taking in as a human being, right? Just look at just how complex this is. At any moment, we can be in touch with our five senses, right? That's how we perceive the world through touch, taste, smell, sight, hearing. That largely speaks to exteroception. That's our way of sensing the world outside of ourselves through these five senses. We can also be in touch with interoception, which is that sixth sense on this diagram, which is really about sensing the interior of our body. We do have interoception as an ability. We have an interoceptive sensors inside us that we can sense what's happening inside us. For most of us, we are geared towards exteroception because in that physically dangerous world, we had to be. We had to be very aware of what was happening outside of us. And now, in our more modern, evolved, and complex world, I believe it's a much needed skill to increase our ability to sense inside ourselves, right? To increase interoceptive ability. So those are things we can be aware of. Exteroception, five senses, says interoception inside of us. We can also be aware of our mental activities, right? Our brain, our thoughts, in our head. Our mind is always churning, always spinning. If you find that that's happening for you, you're always having thoughts, you can't quiet the thoughts. You are, again, 100% normal. And the goal in this practice of presence is not to quiet the thoughts, but to develop awareness of them, right? That word in the middle, develop awareness of them. When we increase awareness, we can make other choices. And that's something else this practice of presence helps us do. Increase awareness of the things that are happening outside of us, of the things happening inside of us, of our mental patterns, so we can make different choices. When we do that, when we increase awareness of those things, that's using our state of being, so we can make choices around how we want to respond. That's our doing. And when we do that, we get the results we actually want. And then the fourth quadrant on this wheel speaks to interconnectedness. So this is something else we can also be aware of, right? In addition to the thoughts in our head, we can be aware of the people around us. What are they sensing or thinking? What's going on with them? How might I be impacting them by the way I'm showing up? And how are they impacting or influencing me? A lot of times this is all happening underneath the surface, right? We're automatically sensing what's outside of us, automatically sensing and responding to what's inside of us, automatically reacting to those, those thoughts, most of which are not helpful, automatically hearing those and responding to those, automatically reacting to maybe, what is the dirty look someone gave us, or, the sadness someone else might be feeling. We're doing this automatically, again, without that awareness, right? But if we can increase that awareness, really practice that state of presence, so we can be aware of all of this, then again, we can make those different choices and get those different results. So this is part of what we can do with this practice of presence, which I want to introduce you to. So what I would say, the definitive, I've thrown this word around a few times and I haven't even defined it yet. What I would say is that presence, oh, apologies, my phone is ringing. Presence is a state of awareness where you are two things. You are both stress regulated and you are aligned with what is most meaningful to you. And so maybe up till now, you've tried meditation, you've tried mindfulness. I have no doubt that you've done that. These terms have been around for long enough that likely you've tried those things. But when I speak to people, most of the time what I hear is that they think of those mindful practices as a way to calm themselves down, right? To help reduce stress, to be less stressed out. And yes, that's one aspect of it. You're stress regulated, but also you're aligned with what's most meaningful to you. That's present in every state in every part of the day. It might be too high of a lift, but in the majority of the day, you are in this state of presence where you are stress regulated and you are connected to what you most deeply care about, right? And there's one practice that I want to introduce you to. This is the part where you need to be standing for this. That helps you do both those things, right? Helps stress regulate yourself. That speaks to your state in the moment, and also helps you connect with what you most care about. That speaks to what, your values or what brings you the most meaning in your life. And so I want to introduce you to this practice called centering. And it's a practice I learned when I did a weekend intensive in Petaluma, California, at an institute called the Strozzi Institute. And this is a school of embodied leadership. They also teach embodied coaching. I mentioned I'm a coach, and embodiment is one of the tools I use. And this is foundational to their program. So it's a practice called centering. Strozzi is not the only organization that teaches centering. There are many others. But the practice I'm going to introduce you to today is a Strozzi-based version of centering. All right, so let's do it. Let's do it. I'll invite you to find a place to stand, somewhere in your space, whatever space you're in, to find a place to stand. This practice of centering is different from any mindfulness practice you might have done in the past, in that it is recommended to keep your eyes open. It's recommended to keep your eyes open. If you find that challenging, then you can close your eyes, but please know that eventually this is meant to be done with eyes open because it's meant to be a practice you can access as you go about your day, for you to be centered in the middle of a work meeting, for you to be centered, in the middle of a conversation with your daughter or whatever it is. And it's much easier to be having those conversations with your eyes open. All right. So before I even, well, this is a part of centering, take a moment to scan your own body as you stand there. And don't even think about getting into a meditative type position right now. I'll just ask you to stand as you would normally stand. So I know for me, my hip will be jutted out to the side. I might go a little bit off balance. My hip is jutted. I'm trying to adjust the camera. My hip is jutted off to the side. I might have one arm on one hip. Just stand as you would normally stand. Stand as you would normally stand. And notice, increase awareness, right? How you normally stand. Take a moment, get curious. What's that? What do you notice as you stand that way, as you would normally stand? Take a moment to increase awareness. How do you feel as you stand that way? What's the mood or the state the mood or the emotion that goes along with standing that way? And anything else you might notice? You might notice areas of tension in the body. You might notice a feeling. Or anything else that goes with that. And I'll invite you to practice this centering, this centered state with me. And there's 4 different dimensions, 4 different aspects to it. The first one is length. To introduce you to it, I'll invite you to bring your awareness to the soles of your feet. So it can be helpful to place your feet about hip width apart here, feeling supported and grounded, and bring your attention to the soles of your feet. And notice what happens in you as you bring your attention to the soles of your feet. Often, and this shows up in research, the nervous system tends to calm down as soon as you focus on the soles of your feet. And researchers don't know why, but they found that correlation. When people focus on the soles of their feet, their nervous system tends to calm down. And noticing whether that's happening in you. And if it is, that's one quick way you can stress regulate yourself in the middle of a busy meeting or with whatever's going on with you, is to focus on the bottoms of the feet. The other thing that focusing on the bottoms of the feet gives us is a sense of grounding or rooting. And so as you focus on the bottoms of your feet, see if that's available to you, this feeling of being rooted or grounded. And if that feels too far-fetched, then I'd invite you to remember that we are literally held to this planet by a force called gravity. So something is rooting or grounding us. And whenever I say that, whenever I remind myself of that force called gravity, I feel that grounding, right? I feel that being held by something. And again, noticing if there's anything that comes up for you as you connect with that idea of being held by something here. So there's 4 dimensions. We're still on length, right? And there's 2 polarities associated with this. The first one is being held, rooted, grounded. The other one is lifting up, right? And you can think about, you might separate the vertebra, find some space between your ribs and allow yourself to take up some length, Take up some length from that place of grounding or rooting, just like the tallest trees, we root down, they root down to rise up. You can do that too, root down to rise up. So from that place of grounding, finding that length, might separate the vertebra, separate the ribs, extend the crown of your head towards the ceiling. And take a moment to connect with the space up here, just to sense into the space up there above your head. And notice what's available to you there. You know, for me, when I connect with the space up here, I'll feel a sense of awe or wonder. But maybe it's different for you. So your length, this place between the two poles, what's above your head and what's below, is associated with dignity. This is the dimension of dignity. An invitation for you in this practice of centering, which helps us cultivate presence. Invitation for you to take up the amount of dignity that's rightfully yours. Right? Take up the amount of dignity that's rightfully yours. And again, noticing whether this is something that feels like it's what you do. Do you do this already? Do you walk around with this amount of dignity? Or is this new to you? And if it's new to you, what different results, what different choices might you make? What different results might you get if you walked around with your rightful amount of dignity? All right, that's the first dimension. Second dimension is the dimension of width, right? And this is a program for women. And typically, for many of us women, we have been conditioned to take up less space, right? We've been conditioned to take up less space, right? And that might show up in our physical bodies through diet culture. It might show up in the amount we allow ourselves to speak up. And so to access this dimension, you can bring your attention to the sides of your body, both sides, and see if you can get a sense of whether you're holding yourself in or whether you're taking up the amount of space that's rightfully yours. And because for most women, we tend to hold ourselves in, I'll invite you to take up a pose. We'll exaggerate it for a bit. So placing your feet a little bit wider, expanding your arms out to the side, and take a moment to practice taking up a lot of width, right? Take a moment to practice taking up a lot of width. You might roll your shoulders back. You might even look up a bit. And as you're in this pose, simply, it's not always simple, but notice for yourself, does this feel natural to you? You know, not necessarily the physical pose, but taking up this much space. What's coming up for you? Is this something you naturally do? Or is it uncomfortable? Right? Is it uncomfortable to take up this amount of space? And you can even drop the arms if the arms are getting tired. But stay connected to taking up increased space and noticing, does this feel uncomfortable? Or is it familiar? So I had you bring your feet out. I'll have you bring them back to a more hip width position. And again, without necessarily expanding out the arms, see if you can take up the amount of space that's right for you, right? That might be about expanding through the shoulders, might be about relaxing the arms, whatever it is. See if you can take up the amount of space that's right for you. So I said the vertical dimension is associated with dignity. The horizontal dimension is associated with connection, right? Our connection with others, with other people. And again, noticing whether you tend to hold yourself in or if you allow yourself to take up space. The third dimension is front and back, the dimension of depth. And let's access it first by going behind us. So bring your awareness. You can imagine taking in everything behind you, right? And so you don't need to look around. But with your senses, take in everything that's behind you, everything that's behind you in space. I'm beginning to sense into that, sensing into everything that's behind you, sensing into the back of your body, right? The back of your head, the back of your shoulders, the exterior of your skin along the back of your body, sensing into that. Noticing if that's something you stay connected with or not, if it feels unfamiliar to take in the back of your body. And what I would invite you to consider this idea that everything that's come before you or behind you, everything that's come behind you has happened on purpose to help prepare you for what's ahead. So this dimension of front to back is the dimension of time. And everything that's happened behind you is associated with everything that's happened in your past. And invitation to imagine that everything that's happened in your past was planted specifically for you to help prepare you for what's ahead. And again, noticing whether that's a new idea, whether that's something you're familiar with. And to help reinforce that, you can imagine palms, two palms on your back, right? Pressing into your shoulders, supporting you, holding you up, bolstering you, preparing you for what's ahead. And we can, for a moment, shift our attention to everything that's in front of us, everything that's about to come. And seeing if you can find that place of balance between everything that's happened in the past. You might even shift backwards onto your heels for a moment. And everything that's to come. You might even lean forward onto your toes for a moment. And I know this is my typical pattern. So, typical pattern for a lot of us born in our future focused culture is to face forward, lean forward into the future. And as a practice and presence, you might see if you can find that balance between everything that's behind you and everything that's to come. So we've centered in 3 dimensions so far. There's one more to go. We've centered in our length between top to bottom, in our width, side to side, and in our depth from the past to the future, finding yourself centered between all of that. And as you find that, as you balance that, and again, this is a practice, I'll invite you to place one hand on your belly, just over your belly button. You can place another one on your heart. Bring your awareness to where your hands meet your body. And if you want to focus on one of those hands over the other, please feel free to do that. And I'll invite you to connect with a couple of questions here and to see if you can answer these questions from the neck down. So keep your attention anchored on where your hands meet your body. Keep your attention anchored where your hands meet your body. And I'll ask you some questions. What is it that you really most deeply care about? What's something you're committed to, a change you want to make in your life? And who do you want to be? Who is it that you want to be? Whether it's at work or with the people you care about, who do you want to be? And last question here, what quality do you want to grow in yourself? You may or may not be able to answer that now. If not, that's okay. But what quality would you like to grow in yourself? So you are standing with your eyes open. You can release your hand. I invite you to stay connected to this feeling of being centered already. So I think of centering as like your ready position, right? If you play tennis, then you're familiar with this idea of having a ready position where your knees are bent, you're ready for both forehand and backhand, right? And I don't even play tennis, but I know that much. You're ready for both forehand and backhand. Centering is the same thing, right? It's your ready position for life. You're ready for whatever comes. And the more often we can be in that state of center, the better able we'll be able to have awareness, make choices about how we respond to things, and from there, amplify the results we get in a way that we're getting results that align with what we actually care about. I'd invite you to, I'd invite you to stay connected to this feeling of being centered. That's your ready position. It is something that needs to be practiced. And so if you are interested in learning how you can adopt this as a practice, please feel free to reach out to me. My name is lizdoyleharmer. You can find me on LinkedIn. And I'd also invite you to grab a pen and paper. So I asked you to have that. Pause this recording and journal anything that comes up for you. If you want to, you can rewind this video to the place where I asked you some questions, grab your pen and paper, and jot down your responses to those questions. And again, they're not thinking questions, they're just intuitive responding questions. Jot down what comes. You might try doing that a couple of times to see what comes for you. All right, I hope you enjoyed this practice of centering. One last thing I'll say in closing is that I would put centering into the category of mental fitness, right? It's a practice that helps you cultivate presence, and it also makes you mentally fitter to take on the challenges that come in your life. And just like physical fitness, we all need some sort of fitness practice. So you might like running, someone else might like yoga, someone else might like swimming. Doesn't matter, but you all have some form of physical fitness practice, ideally, hopefully, whatever it is, to be in your best health. Likewise, for mental fitness, it's the same thing. I believe we all need some form of mental fitness practice to help us thrive in this complex world. Centering is one exercise, is one practice, may or may not work for you. If it doesn't, there are others. But I say this so that you don't give up on the idea of finding something that works for you. All right. Hope you enjoyed this and reach out. You can find me on LinkedIn if you have any questions or comments. Liz Doyle Harmer.